Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Welcome all new listeners and welcome back to those who have heard my content in the past. If you want to know if I had to start all over again as a sports PT, here is what I would do from start to end. Before I go on to that podcast, what is new in life? I recently came back from a conference in Florida, so just right back into the grind. For those who've been listening to my podcast, I've been traveling monthly, twice this month, and yeah, it's just not stopping. I had a good conversation with a couple of my team members, and all of us are addicted is a wrong word. We're very passionate about learning, just about I think self development, all those type of things, and so that's my mode at the moment. So if you're like Chris, when do you ever sleep? When do you ever get to actually do things and not just learn and grow all the time? That's a good question. I fill it in all the time. And I can explain later in another podcast. But yeah, life is good. Getting right back into the rhythm, joining the team again and just getting things organized. My kids are doing great. I told you last week, my son said I was roasted. My son Jacob right now is into talking back at an early age. He is starting to figure out how much he can test. So if I say, hey, I need you to put that ball down, or I need you to put that away, he'll hold it in his hand and he'll wait for me to say it one more time, and I walk towards him and then he'll drop it. So, I think, it's funny how kids will continue to test that. And so it's funny how at an early age, they figure that out because I don't know if he learned it from his siblings. He's truly just learning how much he can push and pull in this world. So it's been good. And that life is fantastic, right back in the rhythm. All right, let's go into this episode. The more sports physical therapists I talk to, I try and understand where they come from. I try to understand what's the context. Where's their question coming from? And just like you and I, we all have different upbringings and the way that we think and we process things. And so the questions that you have are pertaining to kind of what your thought process is at the moment. And so if when a lot of sports PTs ask me questions, I'm like, my context is from my story and I'll share that. And my story has helped me frame how I approach, patients, how I approach athletes. And so I might see it from a different view. And I have to understand where sports PTs are coming from. So, people often ask, well, do I need to do a residency? Do I need to do these things? Should I, take this fellowship? Should I be working with this mentor? And that's a really good question. And everyone has a different answer. And I have a different response for you. But if I would say, if I'm going to start all over again, and I'll share my story. This is how I would do it. In today, working with today's just general outlook on PT, there are some things that I would change and modify along that pathway. I've been practicing 15 years, so I'm going to share inside this episode. I'm going to share my story. I'm going to share what I've done up to this point, and I'll share what things I would have adjusted at what different time points to put me into this current position, maybe faster, at a higher level. I mean, just so many layers on this. So that's what today's episode is about. If I would start all over, here's what I would do. All right, all right. So let's work through this. So if you're gonna take a sports PT route, there's a couple different routes. And I've explained them in different videos and podcasts in the past, but I'm going to consolidate a little bit of everything. I think there's really three tracks for sports PTs. Um, I will mention those, but let me tell you about my track. So I went to physical therapy school in Washington University in St. Louis, and I did a internship with Shirley Sarman. For those who don't know, she's a pioneer in movement, along with Florence Kendall, same genre. Really impacted our profession tremendously. Shirley really taught me movement. She really heightened my sense of awareness of why people move and why they why they create stiffness in their body and all these other things. And that was fantastic. It was a great learning experience, once in a lifetime opportunity. And then I went on to do a sports residency. Fun fact, I almost didn't do a sports residency. I almost took a job as a pediatric physical therapist, which would have just took a whole different route in my life. And I decided that at the very end, that sports PT was my passion, and it always had been. But at the time, I did a rotation in pediatrics, outpatient or pediatrics, and these kids really blew my world. They really made me question what I wanted to do. And I absolutely love kids. I love making an impact. And for these individuals, I can increase their quality of life very quickly. But I learned that I was increasing two quality of lives at the same time, both the parents and the kids. So it was a double whammy every single day. And that's what I enjoyed about it. So decided to take on a sports residency. At the time, there was only five, and each of them were taking one student, one resident. And so the odds were against me. Especially a young punk from San Isidro, California. In a rough neighborhood, rough up. I grew up in a very very rough environment. I was in a point where I wasn't sure if I was even going to have a career, and so for those of you who have been on the podcast, you understand my upbringing. So I went to the sports residency, and I got selected, and I was very very fortunate. I had some great mentors, John DeWitt and Matt Briggs. If you guys listen to this, you guys are amazing. You really have changed my world and how I practice. And that gave me exposure to acute injury management, how to manage athletes all year long. What do they need on the field? How's that changed in the clinic? So I learned movement from Shirley. I learned acute injury management from the residency. I learned in the clinic management. I really learned you had to separate acute injuries from clinical management. And you really don't understand that until you do it. And so every time I see ortho PTs, trying to apply, manage acute injuries the same way they would for a chronic injury, it doesn't work. And not maximizing outcomes. There's a lot of wrong things in there. And so I figured, I learned movement in the clinic, had that going, how to manage athletes, did the residency, and I got a phone call one day from the medical director for the United States Olympic Committee, and they said they want to hire their first physical therapist in Chula Vista, California, which is I'm from. So I took the position, and I worked pro sports. It was kind of like a 7 day a week job. You really didn't get like an off day. You're always on text message, emails. You're always in the clinic. You're treating athletes like 12 hours a day. It just depends on what the situation was. So I learned movement from Shirley. Learned acute injury management from the residency. I learned managing athletes inside the residency. And then I learned how to manage an athlete literally all year long. Like we would have athletes who lived with us, like it was like a dorm setting. So you live on campus and you basically treated them 365 days a year. And you were basically trying to figure out how to keep them at their highest performance. And I really learned that physical therapy is a really bad term for what we really do for people. And I realized that physical therapy is for typically for people who are hurt. So as a physical therapist, I was like, well, I don't want to treat the same person daily who's hurt. I want to treat somebody who's not hurt. So I really had to turn my mindset away from a physical therapist and to really becoming a healthcare provider and helping people minimize risk of injury. In the pro world, if you don't know this, you're judged and based on the number of musculoskeletal injuries that you have, because those are preventable. And so if they're contact injuries, you can't help that. But if they are musculoskeletal, like muscle tissue injuries, like a strain or something like that, it's a ding on your portfolio on your path. And so because those are preventable, so it becomes who went wrong. Was it the coach or strength coach? Was it the PT? So, yes, you would treat a lot of injured people, but probably 60, 70% of my day was working with uninjured people. So, as a physical therapist, it was very foreign to me because you can only give, 10 to 12 exercises 3 to 5 times a week for so long before you're like, well, I see them every day. What, like, at some point, I have to maximize this. So, I started working with strength and conditioning coaches because I realized that these athletes were uninjured. And I was like, well, like, what's next? And I had to figure out, okay, what were they doing all year long? And they were really, from a performance standpoint, they were getting stronger, more resilient. So I spent time with strength coaches, and they helped me understand what it took to really help somebody get strong in the off season, and in the preseason get them fast, and then in season keep them fast. And what we do as sports PTs is actually a joke compared to what real like true strength and conditioning is. And so it's because we live in a bubble, and it's nothing wrong with our profession. It's just we live in a bubble of what like ideal is. But when you work with strength coaches who know what they're doing, we realize that, man, they have an incredible skill set. So how do you adapt it inside your practice? And so I learned a lot from strength coaches on how to program, truly program, undulating program, linear periodization, how to have what to do with somebody in the off season, what to do with somebody in the off season with an injury, what to do with somebody with an injury in season, postseason, preseason, off season, all the above. And so you really understood the gamut of sports PT, which I feel like uh, in school, in CEUs, we're only sold or told about this small segment, which is a small little bubble, like when they're in their clinic. But when they're living the rest of their life, when they're an athlete, like when they come to see us, a small percentage of what they do in a day and understand what they do across a week, a month, a year is incredible. And I was so frustrated for many parts of my career. I couldn't understand how to control these variables. And so then I started working with coaches, like the technical coach. So like, the head rugby coach, the head soccer coach, the head track and field coaches, and understand, all right, great. Like I understand what to do with them when they're having acute injury, but how about we not how about we try and get them away from that and just manage injury prevention? Then I worked towards, movement and enhancing movement quality and working on injury prevention programs. Then I understood the strength and conditioning coaches. I'm like, man, you guys know what to do. So like, how do you help me adapt that so I can create more resilient athletes? And then I was like, okay, so what are they doing on the field? What are they doing from a volume and intensity perspective? So I went to the coaches like, hey, teach me how you do this. And so these individuals are super heightened, focused on which is the most important piece, which is the technical side. How do you get an athlete to be at the highest level all year long? And so that was very, very tough to understand. And just observing these people. And so I really got to see what we do as providers, both at a high level and then at a community based level. After the Olympic Training Center, I took a position training NFL combine athletes for the peak performance. How do you get somebody as fast as possible in 10 to 12 weeks? And when you're trying to cut off a second or, 500ths of a second or 2 seconds off of a 40-yard dash, it's a different skill set. It's learning a little bit more of the periodization and learning more of the speed development, not just strength and conditioning all year long. So I took on that position, and then I got some phone calls from athletes saying, "We have your phone number, and we heard that you enjoy your craft and you're able to manage high level athletes for segments of their career or a year long." And I said, "That's kind of my niche. I can help." And this is before kind of cash based PT was out, before anything really about the concierge PT. This is about 2012. 2013, before Instagram, before YouTube, before Facebook, and before everybody had an account. And at this point, I said, I'll take the position. I think it's kind of the next level of my career. I know injury management, acute injury management. I know injury prevention. I know strength and conditioning. I know technical side. I know movement. I know in the clinic sports rehab. I know post op. What's next? And so then I got to travel with athletes full time. Like I was a concierge, like true concierge physical therapist. I lived with them for 3, 4 months at a time. So they would literally rent me out for a time, and I would travel across state lines. I'd travel to different countries, and they would basically fly me and put me in different hotels, and literally say, "I need you to keep me healthy. I need you to run my nutrition. I need you to help me with my sleep. I need you to run my rehab. I need you to run my massage. I need you to run my mobility. I need you to do my warm ups. I need you to work on my strength and conditioning." The only thing they had was their technical coach, so I had to literally do everything. I had to be the nutritionist. I had to be the dietitian. I had to be the sports psychologist. I had to be the primary care. And when you're traveling in like Europe, New Zealand, all these other places, like you don't have any resources. And this is like, yeah, Google was big, but at this time you're going off of like research articles, you're going off of, different contexts. And so I learned a lot about medication. I learned a lot about Voltaren. Learned a lot about really good, easy things that you can apply, inside your scope or inside your training. Then At that point, it was really fun for me. I was like, okay, well, what is the next step? And so I did that for several athletes. I basically lived in different cities and countries, and I just literally traveled with people. So I came to a point where my wife and I wanted to have a kid, and we backed off of that. And we said, what's the next step? What do you do as a concierge physical therapist who has worked in professional sports, NFL combine training? So at the time, I actually, ironically, got a phone call saying, "Hey, Chris, we're starting a doctor of physical therapy program in San Diego. Would you be willing to help?" I was like, why not? Let's teach now. And I literally helped. His name is Mitch Rao. Is at the currently, whenever you're listening to this, he's a director of the program, and he gave me a call. And I was very fortunate. I mean, it was something to start something from scratch is incredible. What that human being did for the city of San Diego was incredible to start a program. And I was honored to be part of it. Starting the curriculum, I think I taught running analysis, and even my students are listening to this. I love teaching, and I found a passion for teaching. And so in my residency, I taught CEU courses immediately after PT school, I think a year in. So I was teaching PT CEU courses at the same time while I was doing navigating all these things. So I helped start the DPT program in San Diego. And at the same time, I was trying to figure out what my next step was. So why not? I opened a cash-based practice in 2014, and again before Instagram and YouTube, and just took it off from there. And I really just took all the principles I learned from Shirley, from the residency, from the Olympic Training Center, treating athletes as a concierge, traveling the world, NFL combine training, being an educator, and I literally just combined that into my private practice. And so that's been my story. If you follow my podcast, that's kind of like the general gist without the upbringing and everything else. But yeah, so what would I do differently, right? So I said there's three different tracks that you can go through. I think that you can do residency. I think that's pretty straightforward. I think people understand that, but it's not for everyone. It is not for everyone, and I get it. For some people, it's like I have a spouse, I have kids, and I can't make that commitment, or you have a financial burden, and it's very tough for you. I get that. For those of you who do, great. I would highly recommend a sports residency if you have the freedom and wiggle room. And then the other track is to not do a residency. Perfect. If you don't do a residency, there's two different tracks off of that. And one is to do not do a residency and do an SCS or earn your SCS. I think it takes you 2 to 3 years after PT school to be able to do that. You have to be practicing and have a certain amount of hours, sports rehab, observation, all the above. So there's a non-residency SCS track. And then the third option is I don't want a residency and I don't want an SCS. How do I become a sports PT? So there's different tracks off of that. Wherever you find yourself, you're probably along the way. For some people, it's money. I don't want to invest that time. I want to be able to work and create opportunities for myself. That's fantastic. So what I'm talking about right now is purely as a sports PT. What would I do differently? All right. If you're going to do a residency and you've been thinking about it and you have the financial means to do so, you have the time, you don't have the commitments from a family or kids or anything, I would say go for it. I think that what a residency does, it is an opportunity to give you exposure to the most amount of sports-based challenges you will face in your career in a very short consolidated amount of time. And that's very hard to replicate, nearly impossible to replicate. You wouldn't challenge yourself to work 60 to 70 hours a week because you probably can't even do it now. It's difficult to motivate yourself to do 50, and that's 70, 80 hours and not including documentation. Not including documentation. So if you struggle to put that much effort in now, it's probably not for you. And if you do enjoy that type of stuff and you're willing to do that, are you currently doing that now? Why would a residency be the main stimulus to this? Why can't you just do it on your own? And for some people, they can't do it on their own. That's why they need that. So if you need that accountability, you need that. I think it's fantastic. If you feel like that's the thing for you, absolutely. Would I do it again? Yes, I would. I would hands down do it again. Where would I do it? The Ohio State University. I'm biased. I think that place is incredible. It is an incredible learning environment, no matter who you talk to. The mentors you will have are just incredible, and the opportunities, the resources that you have. It's an education based. It's a R1 based facility, so meaning they have a high level education. They have high level research. They have high level like clinical development and outcomes, and they have a D1 sports program. So it's very hard to get all those things together. So if you do a residency in private practice, that's okay too. What do you want, right? What opportunities do you want? If you're like, Chris, I don't want to teach, I want no research, then great, you do a residency anywhere you want. But I wanted research. I wanted to be in a D1 school. I wanted to teach at the same time. So that's why I chose the residency I did. So that's the residency track. Now, if you're like, all right, I want to get an SCS, how quickly would you do it? I do it in the first 3 years. Here's why. There's a leveling off component, and most PTs reach this. They have high level of passion and energy for the first 0 to 3 years. And I can tell you to a T, I mentor thousands of physical therapists who follow the exact same track every single time. Highly motivated. They likely don't have kids or a spouse. Maybe they are engaged. They have a significant other. For the first 3 years, they're highly invested in themselves. And within the 3 years, you generate bills. You generate either a house, or you buy a furniture, you buy a car, and so now you have other things that you have to now pay for. So now you don't have the freedom to be able to do more CEUs, because now you're putting monies towards yourself and your own personal development, not necessarily professional development, and that's not a problem. And then maybe start have to thinking about a wedding, a car. So all those things detract from what you would have invested in yourself in the past. And that's why residency is really good right out of school, because you don't have all of those things, and you're willing, and you have lower risks, so you're willing to do that. That's why I would recommend doing a residency immediately after, versus 1 to 2 year clinical practice. You're likely to meet somebody. You're likely to generate more and more bills and loans, and it's harder for you. You're going to make different, I don't want to say excuses, but you're going to have different challenges to get there. I promise you, it's just the route I've seen. It's harder to do. So in the first 3 years, that's where the problem is. So if you're not going to do a residency, you're like, well, when would you do SES? I do it immediately, because of the same thing: less distractions, less challenges. It's very possible throughout your whole career, and that's fine. If you have kids now, it's very possible. It's just more challenging. So where's there lower friction to be successful? It's earlier in career. And so if you're a student listening to this, do it right now. Plan for it. Boom, love that. If you're in your second or third year and you have none of this, and you have bills and loans and all this stuff, and you're hesitant, just do it now. There's not going to be an easier time. It is there. I promise you, there will not be an easier time. Just do it right now. Like, the only time to do it is right now. So I would do that early on. And if you're later in your career, good for you. I think just do it, right? Like, if you have 2, 3 kids and you're waiting for them to get older, or they're in school, it just doesn't matter. It's never going to get easier. I promise you. It just doesn't. You have more, the more people you get in your world, the more challenges you have. So as your kids grow older, they have more sports, they have more people in the world. Like, there's just more birthdays, more parties. There's just you're less able to study. I promise you. Just do it now. All right. So, Chris, what would you do if you had no residency, no SCS? What do you do? Right. And that's probably the majority of people listening to this. What would you do? If you're not going to do that, I have to ask a question, right? Where's the challenge? Is it the financial means that was the residency? Is it the time commitment of the residency? Is it time commitment of the SES? Or is it your own internal motivation to be able to get there? And for some of you, it's different life circumstances. You don't want to justify it with an SES. Completely get that. You can still be passionate, motivated, and a freaking amazing clinician with no SCS, no residency. Believe me, I coach and mentor them. They are fantastic human beings. Now, that's a smaller percentage. So what do you do? Here's what I would do. You ready? I would find a mentor in the first 0 to 3 years, probably in your first year. Now, this is the question I get. How do I find them? What's the best one? I mean, those are so many layers, hard questions. I would just find somebody that you know who has the clinical skills. They align with your core values, like in terms of professional growth and everything else. And I think you hold on for them. And people ask me this next question: well, how long do I stay with them? I go minimum a year. Here's why. You need to meet with them monthly, bare minimum. In an ideal world, they're inside your clinic. maybe meeting with you weekly. And your job is not to ask them for help with manual work. Your job is to bring them your biggest challenges and get solutions for them so you can quickly avoid making those on the next, patient or athlete or protocol that you work on. And I would find that mentor in your first year, hang on to them for dear life for a year, grab their cell phone and call them monthly, do a Zoom meeting, meet them at a coffee shop. And here's the question. Here's the challenge. I see a lot of people say, they're like, well, I can't seem to find one. Here's the reality of why this happens. I'll be honest with you. They're doing this out of their, like, the goodness of their heart, and they're running out of time as well. And I can be honest with you because I run into this myself. And the only way to get a mentor is you got to pay to play. What I mean by that is, I don't understand how anybody would assume that you can potentially find an amazing mentor for free who's willing to do it voluntarily out of the goodness of their heart and give up their own life with their kids for the same reason you don't want to do a residency or SES. So how is it that you would want to do it, not do an SES because you don't want the time commitment and the money, or you don't want to do residency, the time commitment and the money, yet you would want a mentor to do this out of the goodness of the heart? It just doesn't work that way. So you got to pay to play. And what I mean by that is, I think it's very important you understand how this works. Mentors have their own personal lives, their own professional lives. Maybe they teach CEUs, they work on different clinics, and their time is as valuable as yours. And they have to allocate different time to different people. And if they're doing that for you, volunteering will only take so much. And the reason why you probably haven't had a mentor is because you've asked them to volunteer their time. You're like, nobody wants to do it. Well, yeah, because they're not going to do it for free. And in our world, in world of PTR, we're big helpers and doing all these things. But what you have to do is, people are giving up their time to be able to help and support you. And the best way to steal their time is to pay them. Now, there's plenty of mentoring programs. There's evidence in motion. There's plenty of them. I'm not an ambassador for any of them. As a matter of fact, I have my own. And the only reason I tell people to come to my mentorship groups is because they align with my core values. They align with how I view PT and where the heck I'm going to push sports PT to where it's never been before. That's my mission. Maybe the other organizations and programs might be, I'm going to teach you clinical skills, and I'm going to allow you to, work on mobility and, work on blah, blah, blah. That's just not my framework. My framework is not just working on your clinical skills. My framework is teaching you how to become a better thinker, so that way you don't have to depend on me for clinical skills, so that you can figure out anything that you need anytime that you want. So that way, along this whole path, my job is to set you with confidence in any environment, whether that's on the field, in the clinic, in the weight room, as a traveling physical therapist, or at the highest stage possible, like a Super Bowl or like an Olympics. I've done them. I know what they feel like, and there's a lot of pressure. No mobilization is going to make you successful in that highest potential place. Is an understanding of the framework of what people are looking for, what the situational awareness is, and how you're going to play a role. Now, you need to figure out who your mentor is in the first year. I would invest in one of these programs. And people are often like, well, why would I do that if I don't want to do an SCS, or I don't want to do, residency? You need somebody who's willing to coach you and mentor you for minimum a year. And if you want to get that for free, good luck. Here's the route that most physical therapists take from 0 to 3 years. You know what they do? They'll say, I don't want to do an SCS or a residency because that takes time or money. I'm going to do this on my own. I'll find my own mentor. So here's what happens. They take the bare minimum CEUs. They take one course a year because that's only the bare minimum, or maybe that's all their clinic has allocated towards their funds, one or two, right? Maybe two. So that means that you've only done 4 full days of CEUs of growth over 52 weeks, 365 days, you've grown 4. And then they expect, well, because I took 4 days of education with no mentoring to help me transfer that to clinical care, which you probably forgot within a week of taking the course, they think wow, I'm really growing as a clinician. When in reality, you haven't grown in any capacity. You haven't learned what to do on the field. You haven't learn how to become a sports physical therapist off the field or strength and conditioning. All you've learned is a couple things to help you with as a better manual therapist in the clinic, as a better movement specialist in the clinic, and you haven't grown out of your domain. And only a mentor would tell you what to do, and what you're seeing it from is what you think is best. And in PT school, they told you what was best, and a mentor tells you what's best because they can see it from the outside. Then as a clinician, you think, well, I'm independent now, I can do it my own. You'll do it what you think is best, which is you're only going to work on your strengths. So what would I do in my first year? I'd find a mentorship program and invest in myself. How much do they cost? They can cost from $1,000 to $5,000. Now, if you do a residency, they're often 30 to 50%, pay off your salary. So, I mean, that's a little bit more of an investment, but you're getting more hours, more resources, more opportunities. And if you do an SES starting on your own, it's going to cost you 2 to 3 thousand anyway, but an SES doesn't guarantee that you can clinically apply it. So most bang for your buck is to do a residency. If you're not going to do a residency, I always find a mentorship program to help you through that process. And if you know what the next response is, you're like, oh, well, I don't have that money. Well, what do you want? Like, what if you're not going to invest in yourself? What are you going to invest in? The TV that is going to give you mind numbing satisfaction that you probably don't need to watch more Netflix. You probably don't need to watch, more football games. You really just need to sit down and apply it to yourself. And so, whether it's you buy the new TV or you buy the new sneakers that really have nothing to give you long term gratification, in our world, PT is a very short term gratification profession, like, so we can create a comparable sign and they feel better. So that's why we know we're doing great. And so we're very used to that. I know I'm doing great because I'm producing good outcomes. When in reality is, if you really want to become a good sports PT, there's delayed gratification. I'm going to invest in myself now and observe other people, put myself in a program. So in 2 to 3 years from now, I can be on the field. I can be working with athletic trainers. And so most PTs, here's what happens. You take clinical based CEUs, hoping that's going to help you be on the field. That just doesn't work. You have to be able to develop yourself and develop the skills that are on the field, on the field. So you got to get exposure to on the field, and you got to get exposure to strength and conditioning. You can't just take a CEU course and stay in the clinic and assume that's going to apply to everything. And only mentorship is going to get you out of that. When you pay to play, you pay attention. People who pay attention. So if you're not investing, ready for this? How much time and money have you invested in the last year into professional growth? If you say, well, my company paid for 2 CEUs. No, no, no. I'm asking how much you have. How much time and money have you invested in your own professional development and growth? Not how much podcasts have you listened to. What have you paid for to force you to grow? And if you haven't put any money towards your growth, that's a reflection of you and where you're at in your career. And for a lot of people, that's tough to hear. They're like, well, I'll wait till next year till my budget allocation goes up. You're only growing at the rate that you're allowing other people to, which is really what insurance has done to patients and athletes. You're only allowed 8 visits. So they only come for 8 visits. They need more, but they're not willing to. Why? Because they don't pay attention. And so for the same thing for you, if you're only taking 1 to 2, then that's how fast you're growing. You need more, but you're not willing to. So you're not really investing. You're not wanting to grow beyond where you're currently at. So if it were me starting all over again, and if I didn't do a residency and I didn't do an SCS, how else do you think you're going to grow? You're going to have to invest in yourself into some form of mentorship program. And I wouldn't just ask a random mentor to do it. Why? Because they're not invested. They're not going to, sit down for 3 hours every single month or every other week and give you an opportunity to voice your concerns, go through the whole process. It's why I created my program, because I couldn't find anything. And I was sick of physical therapists saying, well, my mentor this, well, my mentor this. Well, fine, I'll create it for you. And now it's your opportunity to develop that. And now the next challenge has always been, the question is, well, I don't want to pay, Chris, I don't want to pay. Well, how do you expect to grow? And you're always going to see this. And I promise you, bring me the next challenge. It's always going to be that. So if you're a sports PT and you're stuck, it's probably because you're not investing your time and money into yourself. And it's very difficult to do that. No one's going to force you to do things except if you pay attention. That's literally it. That's when patients only listen to you if they have co-pays to pay and they're like, oh, this is the 2 visits I'm allowed, so I'm going to listen to everything. If physical therapy was free, think about this. Your outcomes would be poor because nobody would be showing up. Think about pro bono clinics. They don't show because it's free. High school injury prevention or injury screens that are completely free, people don't show up to. And so the same thing is happening inside your career. So if you're like, hey, what would you do? I'd invest in a program. I would do it right off the top. Ideal world, you ready for this? You do an SCS, excuse me, you do a residency. Ideal world, I do an SCS, excuse me. I would do a residency, get the SCS, invest in mentorship programs, and just ride the wave with more and more growth inside mentorship programs. That's literally all I would do, and I wouldn't personally try and do anything on my own. That's just I have I'm right. That's where I'm at right now. I'm in several programs and leadership development and clinical skill development. I mean, there's so many things that I'm involved in, and I have to pay attention, just like you. It's a human nature thing. It's not just a PT thing. It's not just a you thing. Like, well, I live in Indiana. It's different for me. I live in Florida. It's different for me. It's not the case. The case is that you're just a human, and this is how we think and process. And so if you're looking for the best opportunities to grow, I think you find yourself a group, you find yourself a person, anything, a community, to put yourself in the best positions possible. That is the ideal scenario, and that's what I would do if I had to start all over again. That's what I would do, and continue to do CU courses and everything else on the top. I'm just adding layers onto what you're probably already existing with the framework and background that's going to help you be more successful inside your practice. So, for those of you who are like, all right, I'm sick of it. I don't want to be doing this all over again. I feel like I'm going in a wheel. I've put, to my 2 CEUs. I don't have a mentor in my clinic. That's why I built my Sports PT Academy, truly just to be able to give people an opportunity. And I understand, people have a hesitation. So that's why I have a trial. I have a 2-month trial. If you're interested, come on in, drchrisgarcia.com/academy. And it's for the clinician who is tired and frustrated. It's not for the clinician who is like just searching and want to try things out. Don't do it. You're going to waste your time, energy, and money, and my time as well. So, honestly, if you're committed and you're like, hey, this is something I'd be interested, tell me more. Go on to the webpage. Or send me an email, drchris at drchrisgarcia.com. If you're like, hey, I'm not there yet, but I'm interested, then I would take my Sports PT Kickstarter course. It's an 8-week mentorship program with me online, and gives you an opportunity to see my framework and see what I'm about, and give you an idea of what's needed. And whenever you're listening to this, it is coming up in January of 2024, January 10th, I think. Nonetheless, drchrisgarcia.com/Kickstarter. Yeah, there you have it. I hope this helps in your wherever you are in like your world of like, what would I do? Am I on the right path? This will kind of help your with your framework. So I hope that helps along that journey, and I hope you're doing awesome and amazing things and you're staying healthy. I will see you guys on the next episode. Take care.